So glad you can make it. Welcome to Start Your Path to a Successful Career in IP, presented by the Diversity and Inclusion Committee of the Intellectual Property Owners Association, otherwise known as IPO. My name is Rich Watkins, and I am a Senior Principal Legal Counsel at Medtronic. I graduated from Morehouse College with a degree in chemistry and later obtained a law degree from Georgetown. IPO believes that intellectual property rights accelerate the innovation, creativity, and investment necessary to address major global challenges and improve lives. We strive to maximize innovation across all industries and improve lives throughout the world by fostering high-quality rights and effective, harmonized systems to obtain and enforce them on behalf of our members. IPO believes that the vitality of the association and the IP profession is dependent on the contributions of community that reflects the diverse perspectives of a global economy. In that vein, we understand that having a diverse pipeline of talent is vital to maintaining our high standards of representation, and we know that is the right thing to do. Each of the panelists will talk about their career journey and what we hope that you will find it instructive and inspiring. I will introduce our esteemed panel, all of whom attended HBCUs in undergrad, but first I will spend just a few minutes at the top to level set everyone on what IP is. There will be a Q&A period at the conclusion of the panel discussion, but if you think of a question during the discussion, please put it in the chat and I will try my best to raise it at the time or during the Q&A. The legal foundations for U.S. intellectual property rights was laid by the founders in 1787 in the very first article of the U.S. Constitution, which outlined the precepts of our democratic society. In Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8 of the Constitution, Congress was given the authority to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. I will briefly touch on each of the four main areas of IP law in the following slides: patents, copyrights, trademarks, and trade secrets. Patents. This may be the most well-known IP area. By far, the amount of money at stake in patent litigations far outweigh the other areas. We have people on the line, some of our panelists litigate patents and some trademarks. A patent is an intellectual property right granted by the government of a nation to an inventor that gives them the exclusive right to the invention for up to 20 years in exchange for disclosing the details of that new technology to society for its ultimate benefit. Copyrights. Most of us are familiar with copyrights through music, literature, and visual arts. You may have seen the copyright symbol of a C with a circle around it at some point. It gives the creator the exclusive right for a limited time to control how the work is published, reproduced, performed, or displayed. Trademarks. This is how we recognize the brands we love, like the Nike swoosh used as a watermark on this slide right here. A trademark is an intellectual property right granted by the government to an individual, business, or legal entity that creates and uses a distinctive word, name, phrase, symbol, or device to distinguish its products or services from those from any other entity in the marketplace. Trademarks can last as long as they are being used. Trade secrets. Perhaps not as well known as the other areas, but still a very powerful tool of protection. Trade secret law is a source of protection for intellectual property that serves as an alternative to patents and trademark law, requiring that the intellectual property not be publicly disclosed. Trade secrets can last forever, as long as the holder is successful in maintaining that secret. All right, that's where we are. Some examples. On the far left is an example of the front page of a patent. Many people have heard about patents, but may not have ever seen one. On the front page, you have the number of the patent, when it was patented, the inventors, an image, and the summary of the patent at issue. This one here is a patent by Michael Jackson. It's a patent on a dance move he created where he made it appear as if he was leaning far more than was humanly possible on the dance floor. In the middle, the Golden Arches, a well-known trademark. And to the left is Coca-Cola. The trademark Coca-Cola is apparent, but the formula for Coca-Cola, as some of you may know, is a trade secret. Now to our panel. First up is Serena Farquharson-Torres. Good afternoon to you, Serena. I'm going to see if you are unmuted. You are. Go ahead and tell us about yourself.
Oh, hi, everyone. Very glad to see you on this panel. My name is Dr. Serena Farquharson-Torres, and I'm Senior Corporate Counsel at Bristol Myers Squibb. I have worked at Bristol Myers Squibb as a patent lawyer for 4 years. And before that, I've worked at 2 different pharmaceutical companies, Schering-Plough and Sanofi. And I started in private practice at a law firm in New York City. My educational background is that I attended Howard University and majored in chemistry, got a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry, went on to get my PhD from University of Minnesota in biological chemistry, and decided to go on to law school at the University of North Carolina. I've been married for 16 years now, and I live in New Jersey with my husband and my 3 daughters that you see pictured here. These are their Halloween pictures. I have twins who are dressed up in their anime costumes, and my sophomore daughter who is dressed up as a judge. Some fun facts about me is even though I was raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I attended graduate school at the University of Minnesota, I hate the cold weather. My paternal family is from the Bahamas, and I'm usually there every Christmas. Unfortunately, I won't be able to go there this Christmas because of the pandemic. And I love to cook native Bahamian dishes. Very nice to meet everyone.
Thank you, Serena. Next up, we have Mareesa Frederick. Mareesa, are you unmuted?
I now am unmuted.
All right, go ahead. Please tell us about yourself, my Spelman sister.
Thank you, my Morehouse brother. And good afternoon, everyone. Serena, it was good to see your kids. I've known you for years and didn't know who your kids were or what they looked like. So that's good to see them. So as you can see from the slide, I've been practicing over 20 years. I now am a partner at Finnegan, but prior to that, I worked at the International Trade Commission, which is a governmental agency that handles patent litigation, other intellectual property matters that involves imported goods. So it was a great time for me to get experience, getting some real trial work for that time, working for the government. So it was a really great experience for me. Right out of law school, though, I had come to Finnegan and worked as an associate. So I started at Finnegan, left, went to the ITC, and then returned to Finnegan 5 years later. So now at Finnegan, I primarily do intellectual property litigation with a specialty in ITC litigation, of course, because of my government experience. And I also do some patent counseling as well in the area of due diligence and licensing. So in terms of my background from a technical perspective, I started out at Spelman, as Richard mentioned, and I got a bachelor's in chemistry. Then I went on to Georgia Tech and got a bachelor's in chemical engineering. Spelman has a dual degree program, as well as Morehouse and Clark, other members of the AUC, where you spend 3 years getting your degree in the science, and then you can spend 2 years at another institution that has an engineering program and get your engineering degree. So I participated in that program. Let's see, in terms of my hobbies, I like baking, reading, and exercising, and I also love traveling. So that's why this pandemic has really put me in a not so great place, because it's prevented me from traveling for quite a few months. In terms of fun facts, I used to make Kit Kat bar wrappers. So after college, I went to work for ExxonMobil in Rochester, and I made plastic for them. And so I made plastic cereal bags, and I made Kit Kat bar wrappers. It was a great way to give me some practical experience after getting my engineering degree. Just another fun fact, I love to make pound cakes. I make them every holiday, and there's one in the picture. That's my lemon pound cake that I enjoy making. And then I have two kids, ages 9 and 12, and we live in Washington, D.C.
Awesome. All right. Next up, Alesha. Are you on? Hello, Alesha. Dominique.
I do see her, but I can't hear her is the problem.
Same here. Let's see if there's anything in the chat. There. I do not see that. I'm just check my email here. Oh, the code is not working. Oh my gosh. Okay. Forgive me, everyone. I have to resend her credentials. All right. Okay. While we wait for her to join in, Alesha Dominique is our next panelist. When she dials in, I will give her time to tell us about yourself. But I want to give Mareesa and Serena a chance to tell us about how they got into IP law.
So I got into IP law. I would have to start by saying that after I got my bachelor's in chemistry from Howard, at that point in time, I didn't know anything about IP law. I had no thought in my mind about becoming a patent lawyer. I thought about going to law school, just a hint of a thought. And then I went on to get my PhD. And then when I did, after that, I still didn't know really what I wanted to do. I was thinking about being a professor or working in industry as a scientist. But to buy more time, I decided to do a postdoctoral fellowship at Duke University, where I was able to participate in career fairs. And one of them was, what are you going to do with your PhD now? The other one was alternative careers in science. And thankfully, I had a couple of patent lawyers who presented at those career fairs. And that's where I got my first understanding of the connection between law and science. And what really pushed me into thinking about this career was reading some case law. And what I saw was all of the cases were dealing with science. And I always did love like Law and Order and different type of investigations and things. And so it just was very exciting to combine the two things that I loved. It was the big problem for me was that I would have to go to law school. After going through so much school already, I felt like, did I have it in me to do another 3 years of school? I prayed about it. I took the LSAT applied. I said, after I get accepted, if I get accepted, I would make my decision at that point. And once I got accepted, I decided to go. And I went with the intention of becoming a patent lawyer. I knew that there was other possible careers in law, but I did go there with the intention of patent law. And so once I graduated, I was able to get my first job at a law firm that focused on intellectual property.
How about you, Mareesa?
Alesha, do you want to circle back to see if her microphone's working yet?
Yeah, are we, Alesha, are you up?
I'm here. Can
Awesome.
everybody hear me?
Yeah.
You know, it wouldn't be 2020 without some kind of Zoom issue, right? So.
Oh my gosh, talk about heart racing. Hi, everybody. Sorry about that.
And we have your slide up.
Introduction. Hi, I'm Alesha,
Yeah.
Dominique. I'm a partner at the law firm of Mitchell, Silberberg, and Knupp. I work in our Los Angeles office. I specialize in IP litigation, and I also serve as the first African-American chairwoman of our trademark prosecution department. I've been practicing for 12 years now. I went to Howard University. I have a degree in mathematics, a minor in computer science. After leaving Howard, I did Teach for America for 2 years. I taught in both the Bronx, New York, and then I taught on the southwest side of Chicago. After finishing up Teach for America, I went to GW Law School. My hobbies include traveling with my family. I have 3 boys, a teenager, and then 2 littles, one whose birthday is today. I enjoy attending concerts, reading, and I always like to add that my husband and I throw really, really great house parties. We recently moved from DC to LA, and you know, it's COVID. Needless to say, there are absolutely no house parties happening anytime soon. So we missed that. And fun facts, as I said, I taught public school. I met my husband at HU. We met our freshman year during a screening of Love and Basketball. Going strong ever since. And I was the first Black female valedictorian from my high school in Jackson, Michigan.
All right, thanks. And you know what? I actually forgot about myself. I don't know how I did that. Rich Watkins. I am went to Morehouse, as I said at the top, and went to Georgetown. Got my BS in chemistry from Morehouse College. Similar to Mareesa, I was started out during the 3-2 program, but I realized when I got into my engineering classes that this is not something I really wanted to do, and just went straight chemistry. So I've been practicing about 20 years now, 6 years at Medtronic. Some of the fun facts are there to the lower left. Ran with the Bulls twice with some of my Morehouse brothers, once upon a crazy time. I like to travel as well, and there are some other non-legal things I've done there. Hobbies, I do like getting out in nature and hunting and cooking for my family, and volunteering when I can. And to the left there, my hobbies are my sports interests. Formula One racing with Lewis Hamilton, who has won more races than anyone ever, and has tied the record for Formula One championships just last week. And I'm a Steelers fan. So, and I'm one of those parents that I can't find a bad picture of my kids, so I ended up putting a lot of them on there. And the newest edition is right there on the bottom with her little fuzzy little hat on, Nia. My daughter Elle is here, and my wife Ayana. So now fully into the discussion mode. So Alesha, when you checked in, we were on the question of how did you get into IP law, which really is, how you got into law school, and Serena led us off. So if Mareesa or Alesha, if you want to pick up there, how you decided to go to law school and get into IP law. How about you, Alesha, since you're unmuted now?
Sure. So I decided to go to law school because I was inspired by Thurgood Marshall, who at the time was the first Black Supreme Court justice. And so as a young girl, I would read a lot about him, and I was just incredibly inspired by his path, especially the fact that he went to Howard Law. And so I said to myself, you know, I'm going to model my career after his. I'm going to be this fantastic civil rights lawyer. You know, that's my path. And went to law school, but I certainly am not a civil rights lawyer. When I went to law school, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. You know, by that time, life had sort of changed a bit, and I was thinking maybe I'll do more juvenile justice work, which I guess arguably is sort of a form of civil rights ish work. But I come from a family of engineers and just people in the STEM field. And so they really encouraged me to just get a taste of IP law to see if that might be something of interest to me. So I took a survey course and really, really enjoyed it. I especially enjoyed the patent section. So after that, I took a patent law course, did really well, and summered at a firm that had a great reputation doing IP litigation. During my summer, I worked on some really interesting patent matters, and in a lot of ways, the rest is history. I went on to work as an IP litigator at that firm. My career has morphed a bit to the softer IP side of things, but yeah, I mean, I never.
Let me interrupt there because you mentioned softer IP. Not a lot of people know what that means. What do you mean by soft IP?
Sure. So like I said, I started off as a patent litigator, but as Richard mentioned, there are other aspects of intellectual property law. And so trademark and copyright law are sort of sections of IP law. So my career sort of morphed more in that direction, mainly because I enjoyed it more over time. So today, my practice really is largely trademark prosecution and litigation and copyright litigation in the entertainment space.
Mareesa, how did you get into IP law?
Thanks, Richard. I mean, for me, there wasn't really one thing that got me into patent law, but it was really multiple, I guess, interactions I had with it that led me to the direction or to the path of patent law. But I remember when I was in high school, my parents had this book on inventions, and that's when I was first exposed to the fact that inventions existed and then you can get patents for them. So I read this book, thought it was interesting. And when I started at Spelman, I was a math major like Alesha, and I just chose math because I happened to be good at it in my senior year. I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do with it in the long run, but thought since I enjoyed it, I might as well major in it. But then at the end of my freshman year at Spelman, I started thinking about, long term, because one thing about Spelman is the women are very much thinking about their future and what their path is going to look like. And so I started talking to some of my classmates about what they were going to do with their various majors. And someone said, with chemistry and chemical engineering, you can make things like, create makeup or work for like Procter & Gamble and make, consumer products. So that appealed to me because I like the idea of making things. And so I switched my major to chemistry and chemical engineering. And so when I graduated from Georgia Tech, I was thinking about what I wanted to do. And I thought back again to this patent aspect. I thought, well, okay, maybe I should just go ahead and apply to law school. But then I applied and didn't get into the school I wanted to go to. I had this desire to live in New York City. So I really wanted to go to Columbia, and I got waitlisted. So I said, okay, you know what? Maybe that's a sign. I shouldn't go to law school at this very point in time. Maybe I should actually use my chemical engineering degree and see what it's like to actually work in the field. That's what I wanted to do to begin with. And so I applied for some jobs like the summer after I graduated. It was random how I actually found my job. It was a headhunter who had just reached out to me and just happened to find 2 openings at companies that I interviewed for, both in upstate New York. not an ideal area when you're, coming from Atlanta, but, what were your choices when you're a chemical engineering major? And so I went to ExxonMobil, and as I mentioned before, I was making plastic. I was a process engineer doing manufacturing work, working on a line. And I have to say, I really, really enjoyed that. But when I thought about long-term, what I was going to do with that, the only options I had was going to business school and becoming, going more on the business side of things, or becoming a plant manager. And since I didn't want to live in Rochester, New York for the rest of my life, I thought, well, let me revisit my initial thought after Spelman, which is go to law school. And so I reapplied to law school and I got in and decided to move back home to Washington, D.C. And, at George Washington, they're known for their IP program. That's sort of their specialty. And so I was attracted to that. And so I did the IP track, so to speak. So I took a lot of classes in intellectual property, like trademark and patent law. And my first summer after law school, I got a position at Finnegan, where I'm working now. And Finnegan is an IP only firm. They don't do any other areas of law. So I got some great experience very early on in sort of how it all works at law firms and what you can do if you're a patent lawyer. So I worked at Finnegan for the summer, then I interned there during the school year as well. But my second summer, I decided, just in case I really don't want to do patent law, let me go to a general practice firm, try some other areas of law and see if that may interest me. So I went to go work at Arnold & Porter and did work in the food and drug area, in the copyright area, just general corporate work. And then I realized none of those were for me, and that I liked really the scientific aspect of patent law. And so I decided to stick with Finnegan and return after I graduated from law school. And what was really interesting about it is that when I decided to pursue chemistry and chemical engineering at Spelman, one thing I had wanted to do was consider working for a cosmetic company making makeups. I thought that was cool. So when I started at Finnegan, the first projects I got assigned to was doing the patent prosecution for L'Oreal. So I spent 5 years prosecuting hair dyes and shampoos. So I just thought that was full circle. And that was truly showed that my calling was to go into patent law.
All right, thank you. We already have a question from a FAMU Rattler. What do you do if you don't have a hard science background? All of us here on the discussion, including myself, we have degrees in hard science. Some of us even have a doctorate, and we've done hard IP. What if you don't have that hard science background? What's your path forward?
So,
we'll go with Mareesa. Yes, it's your.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult when you don't have a hard science and you want to break into the field of patent law initially, like right out of the bat, right out of graduate from law school. I know my firm, because we're an IP only firm, we're really only looking for law students who have hard science backgrounds, right? But I do know that in some firms, general practice firms more so, there are more opportunities for you to go into patent litigation if you don't have a hard science background. And typically those kinds of attorneys have a significant amount of trial experience. So maybe they spent a few years at the DOJ or, maybe working as an AUSA, but they have significant trial experience and they're able to translate some of the complex technical terms and issues that arise in patent cases in a way that makes sense to a jury. So those are two paths to take, but I do know, I myself have found it to be challenging when I see people who have non-science backgrounds trying to get into patent law to break into it initially. But Alesha and Serena, if you have different observations, I think that would be helpful.
I agree with you, Mareesa, largely. I largely agree with you, especially as it relates to patent law. But like I said, there are other aspects of intellectual property. So if you are interested in copyright, doing copyright work or trademark work, you do not need a hard science degree to explore either of those paths. So while I have a math degree, and notwithstanding the fact that I regularly tell my firm I do not wish to continue doing patent litigation when it walks in the door, I still will handle those cases. But my primary area, notwithstanding the fact that I have a math degree, is now copyright and trademark work. And none of the partners with whom I work or associates have a technical degree. It's not science focused.
Serena, do you have anything to add?
No, they've covered it very well.
Okay, very good. How did you adjust going from an HBCU to a majority institution for law school?
I can say that I went from Howard. Well, I went from a high school that was predominantly white. Then I went to a historically Black college. And then I went to University of Minnesota, where I got my doctorate, where I was the only Black person in my class. And I would say that was where the first that was very isolating. I would say that I went from really enjoying being around a bunch of intellectuals and participating in study groups, and it just was a very fulfilling experience, to feeling really sad, working in the lab, feeling sorry for myself. I would speak to my sister and some of my friends from Howard, and they're like, you're not there to make friends, just get your degree and get out of here. And so it kind of snapped me out of that. And I started to really work with a lot of the Asian students. Once they really got to think of me more than just an American, but an African American, then we started to have a lot more things in common. And I really bonded with a lot of the Asian students to get my PhD. Then I went to University of North Carolina, and we had about, I would say maybe 20 Black students in our class out of a little over 200. And what I liked about the way they handled it was that everyone who either was an alternative type of student, which I fit in because I already had a doctorate, and people who had a second career in law school. We had police officers, nurses, people who went to law school after having a career, and African American and other underrepresented groups. We started earlier than everyone else, and we just bonded. So we had this huge friend group. So once everyone else started, we always had this group of people to rely on and kind of study with and do enjoyable things together. And so I would say that was really how I handled the shift. To me, I think the way the University of North Carolina handled it was far better than the University of Minnesota. Minnesota didn't even acknowledge that that was even a problem or issue, and University of North Carolina tackled that right away.
Alesha?
So for me, it was a relatively easy adjustment. I think largely because I worked before going to law school. And so I really treated law school as a job. It was very different than undergrad. Unfortunately, I think for me, it was not trying to make any friends. I was like, look, I just have to do my 3 years and sort of get out of here. Which on the other side of it, I actually don't know that was the best perspective, because I feel like I have a small group of people with whom I still keep in touch, but I don't have a lot of people that I know from law school, unlike, obviously undergrad. And so my network is smaller in that regard. And so I do think that was a missed opportunity in a lot of ways. But I also had, my husband and I had a son. So it was just sort of the reality for me. It was like, go there from 8 to 6, get home and do my other sort of duties. And so it was a different experience for me. I went full time nonetheless, but I think my mindset was different, and so it wasn't very hard of a transition.
Mareesa, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just have one comment. My transition was, I guess, easy from law school in that I had went to Georgia Tech. You know, coming from Spelman to Georgia Tech was, to me, the biggest transition. But what I took away from my HBCU experience was the value of having a support group.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, early on, I had a group of women that I would study with for all tests. And we continued to do that when we went to our dual degree program. So most of these women were also dual degree, chemistry and chemical engineering, just like me. And so I took that understanding that I tended to work better when I was working with a group of people, and looked to find that same support when I went to law school. So I found a group of students that were similarly situated, a little bit older, were very focused, and looking to go into patent law. Ironically, I had a number of students in my section that wanted to go into patent law. And so we studied together. And so that made the transition from these different environments easy for me, just having a good support system and a group of people to study with.
Okay, we have another question in. Did you have to choose between IP litigation and patent prosecution when starting after law school? If so, what made you choose IP litigation over patent prosecution, or vice versa? I'll take a stab at starting this off. When in law school, you have the opportunity to participate in interviews for internships. Some call it OCI, on-campus interviews. And you take a look at what firms are, going to be there, or businesses. And for instance, I believe Mareesa was saying Finnegan only does IP law. You may have another firm there that's a general practice firm that has a section in IP law or patent law. Some firms, they specialize in, hey, patent law, we have a patent litigation section, a patent prosecution. And so you do your research. You say, hey, I want to really do patent prosecution, and you share that with whoever you are interviewing with, so that they know. Or you may want to have a little bit of both. And similarly, you do your research and you find out what firms have a little bit of both. When I got out, I knew I wanted to do patent prosecution first and foremost. Even if I wanted to do something else like patent litigation, I knew I had to have a firm foundation in patent prosecution. So I chose a small to mid-sized patent boutique firm in Philadelphia and got great experience in patent prosecution. Around my third or fourth year, I started expressing the need to have experience in IP litigation. And I got put on a couple of litigations and tried that out. When I switched firms and moved to Chicago, I did mostly patent litigation. And into the due diligence and legal opinion writing zone. So you kind of do your research, you interview with where you're going to go to see if you can get that experience. Serena, you want to share your experience in that?
Yeah. Okay. My first position was in private practice in New York City at an IP firm as well. It was known for mostly IP litigation, but they did everything, trademark, prosecution, everything. And so I did not have a preference at all. I really didn't know, what it felt like to do any of the types of patent law. So I really did everything. And so I did some prosecution, some opinion work, due diligence, and I was put on a litigation as well. With the litigation, it was some aspects of it that I found very exciting, and some aspects of it I didn't like at all. I would say the parts I liked was like the depositions and the going to trial. Some of the discovery was okay. I didn't like so much of the all of the back and forth with all the different interrogatories, all of these.
You didn't like writing the nasty grams to opposing counsel?
All of that. I just was like, oh my God, just send the freaking letter. And so that was not my passion. And but I did like prosecution a lot. I like that. I found that you still got a little bit of the investigation stuff that I liked about patent law through opinion work, where you just take apart patents, diligence, where you look, you're really investigating the company or their patents. So you still get that kind of a legal type of charge, even though you're not necessarily in court. I also didn't like that the litigation seemed to just take so much of my life. I was just, at the firm so long, late hours, over the weekends. Just working in a law firm in general just didn't work for me. And so the first chance I was able to move in-house, to be in-house counsel at a pharmaceutical company, I jumped at it because I could see that I wanted kind of more of a balance type of career where I had the challenge of a career, but it was more of a controlled lifestyle.
Mareesa.
Nicholas, that's a great question. One thing that Finnegan does is that it doesn't place people in boxes. So if you want to do litigation and prosecution, do them both, you can. If you want to do litigation, you can do that. One thing that I decided when I came to Finnegan is I wanted to make sure, just like Richard did, that I had a firm understanding of how one gets a patent and how that whole process works. Because in my mind, I couldn't figure out how I could litigate a patent, but not know how to get one. So I took, 5 years learning how to prosecute and developing those skills. And I actually really, really enjoyed it. And I had wanted to focus on prosecution and counseling work for my entire career. Like, that's what I thought my practice was going to look like. But in my 5th year, I decided that I needed to do something different career-wise. I was kind of at a point at the firm where I didn't feel like I was developing like I should. And then at the same time, I also got pregnant. So I thought, let me maybe take a step back and try something different. So that's when I went to the government and worked at the ITC and focused only on doing trial work. Now, at that time, I had not contemplated or realized that going to the ITC was actually like going to a firm, because it's like patent trials on steroids. These cases go really, really quickly. So I was doing a lot of them with just myself, no team. And so it was just a good way for me to get experience very quickly. So I developed that expertise. So when I came back to a firm, I couldn't really go back and say, I want to do just only patent prosecution, because most firms were looking to hire me for my ITC experience. So now I focus on patent litigation, but I do enjoy balancing that with some counseling work. So firms, I think, generally give attorneys some flexibility in terms of how they want to develop their career and how they want their practice to look.
Alesha?
I agree with Mareesa. At my very first firm, we were primarily a litigation boutique. That said, if you had an interest in doing patent prosecution, you could, though it was a very, very small group. We primarily had law clerks, law school students, really, working in that department, just because we could bill them out at lower rates. So, that was a path, but it was a very, very narrow path. And typically, if you stayed on that path, at least at our firm, for a long time, then it was harder to break over into litigation, because people sort of wanted your institutional knowledge of prosecution issues for various counseling things, and they didn't necessarily, it was a valuable asset. And so I don't know that teams were as open to making the investment in training you to be a litigator, because they felt like you added so much value in that sort of prosecution and counseling role. So I chose litigation. I really, really liked it. I like the theater of litigating. I like the nasty grams. It's exhausting, but as a first year associate, I had the opportunity to go to trial. I was the only first year on the case team. And for me, it was a big patent competitor case in the District of Delaware. And for me, that's when I really knew that patent litigation and litigation generally was just sort of my thing. And it was interesting because, we had done a lot of work with experts, these highly technical experts, PhDs in electrical engineering and whatnot. And then what you saw sort of on the ground at trial was that, these are juries, right? They're people 18 and up that are deciding these billion-dollar patent litigation matters. And all that work you did with your expert, trying to figure out, various theories, how you're going to say this, how you're going to say that. And, what we learned which was eye-opening for me, was that, we did a mock jury. We used a mock jury consultant that sort of models what the trial will look like and what issues and questions the jury will have. And what we learned from that was that all of that sort of hardcore technical stuff, while it mattered, jurors think about other things. One of the things that one juror said, there's a camera on these mock jurors as they're deliberating. And one of the jurors said, that guy sounded great, but his suit looked cheap. And we were just kind of like, all this hard work, this is hardcore patent litigation. What do you mean? And they were like, I just don't believe anything he's saying. And so what I realized was that, while I'm thinking that I'm doing this big intellectual sort of exercise, and all of that is true, what juries really care about sometimes in these massive litigations that you're spending hours on are like the smaller things that you would never think of. So I know that's sort of an aside, but you can choose. Mareesa's right, and for me, my choice was litigation.
Okay, yeah, juries they can be a fickle beast. Okay, we have two people here, myself and Serena, who are in-house, and then Mareesa and Alesha, they both work in firms. So we have a question from Ito. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Pros and cons of in-house versus law firm. I think Serena kind of spoke to some of it, having more control over her life after her litigation experience. And she and I are similar in that regard. I also was on a litigation, 4 weeks in a hotel room somewhere, working, 20 plus hours a day, literally. And trying to maintain, relationships and a home life and all that was very, very taxing on me. And my solution was I actually had my own little practice for a while after that. I stepped away and did started a documentary company with a friend, a law professor. And then I went to a small company. I worked there for a while before I got this opportunity at Medtronic. So those are some differences have to do with that aspect, but with respect to your career, there are some similarities in that you still have to work very hard to progress, to get to the next level when you're coming into an in-house situation, progressing up to a senior level, a director level, a manager level, a VP level, and knowing how to work that. It's still expected that you know the ins and outs of your profession, being an expert in your field. That doesn't change at all or ever when you're a lawyer. But the aspects of having some more predictability in your life, I definitely like that. And honestly, I like being, with respect to my company, this is not a plug for my company, but I'd like being able to say, hey, I work for a company that helps someone. When I first started working with the company, someone benefited from a Medtronic device every 3 seconds, and now it's down to like 1.5 seconds. And I love being able to say that. And so the work that we do, the products and services that we provide really means something to me. So
Yeah, and
go ahead.
I would just add the career aspect of it. I would say if I had to do it over again, I would say that when I entered into the pharmaceutical career, I did not appreciate how to navigate in a corporate structure, to be able to really move your career along. And my advice, if you decide to go in-house, is to really set your goal as far as like the highest you want to go. I mean, even if it's to be the CEO or the general counsel, aim that high. And then that will help you along the way as far as setting short-term goals, as far as what you need to do in order to be able to meet the right people, come up with the right strategies in order to be able to reach your long-term goal. You might have to take some stretch assignments, work with the business in different ways, different cross-functional teams. It's a huge networking thing that you have to really get used to doing, being able to master that. People need to know who you are. They need to know what you're doing. You can't just sit at your desk doing your job. You need to get out there and meet people and participate in different things. And that way people will not only can become your mentors and help you along the way, but also become your sponsors. And those sponsors are the ones that speak for you when you're not in the room. And so that really it will speed up your trajectory up in your career. And I think that's the biggest thing that I think you still have, the same type of political things, but it's a little different when you're dealing with a business side and a legal side, and being able to navigate that in a way that you can be able to move your career up.
Alesha and Mareesa, you guys are at firms.
So I would say, so the question is, what are the differences between the two?
Right. Well, it was a statement, really. Pros and cons of in-house versus law firm.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Got it. So I think the biggest pro for me at a law firm is independence. I mean, during the course of my career, I've been really given the freedom to develop what I want my practice to look like. Like I said earlier, whether I wanted to do litigation, whether I wanted to do counseling, whether I wanted to do both, it didn't matter. As long as I chose it and worked hard to try to achieve it, my firm was going to let me do whatever I want. And also in terms of support, the firm really does give me the resources I need to develop in any area I want, whether it is, working on, how to develop relationships for client development, for example, or if it's, in trying to improve my public speaking skills. The firms will really back their attorneys to give them the resources they need to be successful. Now, so the independence factor was important for me. The second was I like the transparency in terms of promotions. I knew that as an associate, you pretty much had a lockstep up and you knew what you were going to make every year. And that was appealing to me. And as long as I met these particular milestones, I knew that I would expect, X, right, to be elevated. And one thing I had heard from my in-house friends is that it's hard to go up and be elevated or be promoted at companies, because sometimes you have to wait for the person who's immediately ahead of you to either retire or leave, and they may never leave, and that could prevent you sometimes from moving up unless you did a lateral move within your company or you decided to go and work for a different company. So that was another aspect I like about law firms. I mean, of course, some of the downsides of the firms are the billable hours. I mean, always having to account for every minute of your day. That's not the greatest. I still don't enjoy it, even though I've been doing it for a number of years. It's difficult to balance. You have your family life, you have the business development you have to do when you get to be more senior, try to bring work into the firm. You have to, be responsive to your client's needs. So always being on call, so to speak. So that's a con in terms of not being able to have the predictability in your schedule that I think most people like. Those are a few of the, I guess, pros and cons. I mean, there are more, but I thought I'd just highlight those few just as some examples.
I agree. I agree. The cons are definitely the billable hour requirement as well as the long hours. I mean, you make no mistake. I mean, especially when you are doing litigation at a law firm, the hours can be tremendously long, and it can be difficult to balance the personal with the professional. I would say one of the biggest pros for me, in addition to what Mareesa said, is the variety of matters on which I get to work. I mean, in-house counsel farms out they're difficult questions, typically not their easy ones. Their easy ones they can figure out. When they come to outside counsel, they're looking for creative solutions. And that is exciting for me. Being a strategic advisor to in-house counsel, getting them through very, very tough times is incredibly rewarding to me. So that's why I continue to do what I do, even though the hours are long.
All right, we have a little bit less than 5 minutes to go. We have a couple of questions. We're gonna get to this one. It's pretty important. How has the profession evolved with regard to diversity and inclusion since you started practicing law? I'm gonna couple this with another question from Nicholas Barber. How did you find the right firm for you being a minority? And I'll start it off with how things have changed in the 20 years since I've practiced. I went to Georgetown, and it was one of the larger law schools at the time, maybe around 1,100 law students, 1,200. And in the entire school, I can count on one hand how many patent attorneys of color or people who are going into patent law. I can count on one hand in that large law school. I think the numbers have definitely increased since then. And I think, it has been slow change with respect to numbers of other minority patent attorneys that I run into. It's increased somewhat, but I remember discussions when I was starting out and even mid-career at law firms talking about the need for retention and the need for recruiting. And it seemed like it moved from, quite frankly, first to recruiting. And quite honestly, in my view, firms do a great job of recruiting because you're offering a lot of money to young people. And so they will take it. So you can definitely get people in the door. Then at mid-career, you're worried about retention. And there wasn't a lot of talk about retaining their talent. And I think some firms and businesses are doing a job at retaining them, because again, that's also a factor of giving people money. But when you talk about developing people and making sure that they are doing fulfilling work and having that progression up the ladder, whether it's the corporate ladder or to partnership, that was still lagging. And I think it's still lagging today when you think about leadership posts, chairmanships. It's great. Alesha is chairing her department over at her firm. When you think about that visibility and that level, I think there still need to be gains. Serena?
One thing I could say that when I first started, I don't know if there was so much of a push and connection between in-house counsel and outside counsel to try to change, to improve the diversity and inclusion in firms. So I think what I see that has changed is it's a more openness in our corporations and our D&I committees. Like I'm the chair of our diversity inclusion committee for our law department. And so we are very much focused on how can we use our dollars and the amount of lawyers that we outside counsel that we hire in order to influence and leverage them to increase the numbers of diverse attorneys working on our matters in a substantive ways. We actually really spend a lot of time thinking about that. And as far as relationship partners and being able to have more of the decision making in the firms, to that kind of a partnership between the company and the firms. And that's not just our company. I've heard this from other companies as well. So that's why I think I've seen a change.
Mareesa? Mareesa, did you have something to say?
Oh, I just took it off mute. Which question did you want me to answer? I know that you posed two.
Oh, geez. It had to do with how things have changed with respect to diversity and inclusion since when you started. And you're right,
Okay.
there was a second question of,
Yeah.
you know, how did you, Nicholas's question was, as an underrepresented minority in the IP field, how did you determine if a particular firm was right fit for you? And how did you locate the firm?
In terms of what has changed, unfortunately, I don't see much change in the number of Black attorneys at law firms. It bothers me that I'm the only female Black partner at my firm. I feel like there should be a lot more. And when I look across other large firms in the DC area, there's really not much difference. There's one or two. I mean, Alesha, how many are you the only one at your firm too? So the numbers haven't changed. I mean, if you guess, I mean, it was 0 before, now it's 1. I guess that's improvement, but it's not enough improvement to me. So really, I think there needs to be more retention of Black attorneys at law firms. And also we need to increase the number of students that are going into this field so we can have more to retain. In terms of what I think has changed in a positive way is initiatives. I mean, before when I was a first-year associate, there was no D&I partner, there was no D&I department. And now there's a focus on it, like Serena was saying, between in-house counsel and outside counsel trying to partner, recognizing that we need to improve diversity in the legal field. So that I think is an immense improvement, because with more focus, I would expect to see improved numbers. So maybe in 5 years we can have this again, and we can talk about, you know, improvement in terms of numbers. In terms of choosing a law firm, or how did you choose the best one? How did I choose the best one for me? Honestly, it was more of a luck for me, because I just happened to go to the law firm that hired me right out of my first year of law school, which is pretty rare. I mean, most times you get your law firm job after your second year of law school, not your first. And so working at a firm for so many summers, you know, 2 summers, and then working for a firm during the school year, the same firm, allowed me to build relationships. And building relationships gave me a sense of security. And so I think that went a long way. So I think in terms of choosing the law firm that you go to, I think it's the one where you feel you have the best relationships and the best support system, so you can feel that you can develop as an attorney throughout your entire career.
And Alesha?
I agree with everything that has been said. I feel like I always start speaking by saying I agree with all of you, but I do. And so I'll just add very quickly that in terms of D&I initiatives in law firms, what I've seen more recently is I think an increased desire to get it right. And when I say recently, really this year, sort of post George Floyd and all the activity in the social justice space. I mean, I've seen law firms doing initiatives whereby they are tying partner compensation to partners' commitments to D&I efforts within the firm. So, you know, are you taking a diverse candidate with you to a client pitch? You know, are you making real deposits in diverse associates? Are you, what are you doing in terms of recruiting diverse talent? If you're not meeting these metrics, some firms are saying, look, you don't get a bonus, or, you know, there's something, there's an incentive to doing this. In some firms, at least, they're trying to start initiatives in that direction. The other thing I've seen more of is in-house counsel really demanding it. Like Serena said, I mean, D&I committees within in-house groups thinking of creative strategies to incentivize their outside counsel to make real commitments to this effort. When clients start demanding it, firms will start changing very, very rapidly. And so I think the increased efforts in that regard have created a lot of movement for the positive, at least it seems right now, in increasing D&I in law firms, at least. In terms of choosing the right firm for me, you know, I think for me, it really is, do I like who I'm working with? Do I like, you know, how do I feel on these case teams? As a litigator, you're working with people for a long time and you really want to like the people that you're working with. And I can tell you that I do. I mean, some people are difficult, right? You get that anywhere, but do you largely like what you're doing and who you're doing it with? And if you can answer that in the affirmative, I think it's a win.
And we'll leave it at that. We are a little bit over time, but what that means is we have plenty to talk about. We could have gone on for another half hour or so on this. Thank you, Serena, Farquharson-Torres, Alesha, Dominique, Mareesa, Frederick, for your time today. Thank you to IPO, the Diversity and Inclusion Committee and Outreach Subcommittee, Elaine Spector. I saw you on the line. Thank you for your support and helping make this happen. And thank you to everyone who joined in and supplied questions. Thank you for your time and your attention. We hope this was helpful. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.